Hello, and welcome to Trekkie and Beyond Star Trek podcast. I'm Anika.
And I'm Andrea, and welcome to episode 10 of season 1 of Strange New Worlds, A Quality of Mercy. This is the final episode of this season, and I'm actually a little sad. I thoroughly enjoyed this show. But basically, this whole episode is all about Captain Pike learning that the future cannot always be changed. Just because you want to change it doesn't mean you should, or worse, what happens when you change it for the worse? So let's go ahead and discuss and talk about this top 5 episode. I don't know. We'll discuss. What do you think? What was your initial reactions?
For me, this is not in the top 5. And I felt like this was more like a season premiere episode than a season finale. I wish they would have held this until season 2 premiere and start with this whole other journey. So for me, this is a interesting to learn more about what could take place in the future. But I also felt like it was, for me, a little waste in time knowing that that's not going to take place. So, what about you?
That version. Yeah. Another version could happen. I don't know. I liked this episode. It was because I love Captain Pike, and as I've stated probably hundreds of times, I don't want what his future to be his future. That being said, I love Spock more, and I need Spock to always be alive. But I feel like Pike always has it in his head that peace can prevail. And while that is a great attribute to always have, sometimes you cannot, if someone doesn't want peace, there's no way you can make them see it your way. If their whole goal is to destroy you, you cannot reason with everyone. And so I think this episode helped change his thinking for the future, for the time that he does have left, to understand just because someone has a different idea within Starfleet, just because someone has a different idea than you, that doesn't mean they're wrong. And just because you have to attack instead of always trying to strive for peace also doesn't mean you're wrong. Because I love Pike. He's amazing. He's amazing captain, but there's always room to grow. And I felt like he grew in this episode. And it still sucks because I don't want his future to be his future. And I'm hoping that maybe somehow, some way we can find a way around that without costing someone else their lives or costing a war that can cost the lives of millions. But I liked this episode. I did, because I just felt like it was more of a growth from who he was in the first episode to who he is now. Like coming to terms with it. Oh, I found a way around it. Nope, you gotta go right back to coming to terms with it. So I think it's a good ending to the first episode. So I liked it. So let's go ahead and do a deep dive into this episode. So basically, this one starts with the Enterprise. They are at this outpost number 4, and with another ship, and they're basically getting them what they need to survive. Because the outpost leader is very upset. He's very annoyed. He's like, there's no deliveries. How are we supposed to get stuff in between deliveries? Like, there's no routes, there's no ships, and they're letting him know that we're going to get everything you need. And we meet his son, and his son is one of the people that Pike doesn't end up saving in the future. And Pike has a little bit of a crisis of faith, which sucks because he wants to be a good person. We see that he decides to go back to his quarters and write a letter to this gentleman to let him know, you can join Starfleet, but on this day, don't be here, like as a way to save him. And then we find that his future self comes. And it's a whole different uniform. Something like it's completely different from what he's worn, what we saw him in the future wore in with the time crystal. And his future self is telling him, you can't, like, I know what you want to do, but you can't. And the Klingons even sent me back to stop you. They wanted to do something else, but I asked them just to show you what will happen if you don't allow your future to happen. And sucks, because it means the time crystal was telling the truth, and I still refuse to believe that, even though I know it can happen. So what did you think of those opening scenes with Pike and with seeing the future cadet who's going to die? And then,
well, I had a feeling that he would run into us at one of the cadets at some point in time, because he ends up serving on a ship with them. Mm-hmm. Wasn't expecting it this early on in, I guess, this 7-year journey. But the kid was innocent. He had no idea. He was just looking for his hero. And it goes to show, though, like sometimes our heroes fail us. And I think the kid's a little disappointed because Pike didn't really answer his question and left. But it also shows that Pike is still dealing with the same issues that you mentioned in the first episode of the season. And so Una recognized it. Number one, recognized it right away. I like seeing what the future Pike will look like. So that was interesting to see how they aged him. And I like seeing the new uniforms. I started to get a little worried about the storyline because I don't like mixing with time travel and like I don't it throws me off in my sequence and understanding of things. So I was starting to get a little worried there. Although a few episodes in this podcast ago, I suggested that Pike should go back to the planet and find out more about the time crystal. I wasn't expecting it to occur like this. But it's good that the writers are keeping us on our toes. But I was intrigued at this point, but a little worried about I don't know, going away from canon and then like how the storyline would evolve.
When Pike first like sort of met the child and repeated his name, and you see like that visceral reaction, I didn't realize one until Pike tells Una, you know how I said I saved those cadets, there are two that don't make it, he's one of the two. And it's like, oh, because like I was wondering why he was having such a visceral reaction, because like in a couple episodes, I think maybe episode one or two, we see him naming the list and he's seeing these are the cadets he's going to save. So I'm like, why are you having such a horrible reaction to someone you're going to save? And it's like, oh, no, I'm not, you don't get to save him. Why couldn't he have just saved the kid? Like what is it telling that cadet to survive, but Pike's still trying to save everyone? Change. Or unless there's no one down there for him to save, so he's not there. But he does save the other cadets who were in the room. So he could technically tell the other cadets to stay. I'm still finding ways to keep people alive, people. You know me. Oh, wait, no, I'm dead inside. I'm not the eternal optimist. Whoa. Okay, I'm turning into an eternal optimist at the show. What's going on? And so it's like, well, what was the issue with just him trying to save that kid? Because like it's something. It sucks to meet someone knowing they're going to die. Like you're dead men walking. Your time is limited. Anytime you see a show with someone saying, okay, I know how you're going to die, it's like, it sucks because while we know that he has a time limit, he doesn't. And so he's very excited to join. How do you let someone be your hero? Or how do you be someone's hero knowing you're going to kill them or they're going to die? You could stop them from dying right now, but it's a heavy burden. I didn't realize there were some people who weren't going to make it. And that sucks that we get to meet this super happy kid who loves Starfleet, who loves Enterprise, who has like models of them. And he's going to die before he probably even really truly reaches maturity. It sucks.
Yeah. And it's part of war. It's part of battles. It's part of Starfleet. It's just that, and we keep seeing this hit time and time again home, that the innocent ones are the kids, whether it's in lots of different forms, we lots of different aspects of the storyline, we see that. But I think that letter, that dictation, was going to be the spark of maybe lots of decisions to change the trajectory. And I think that's why I was interrupted, because it was going to start with that, and then it was going to compound, and maybe he was going to send other emails to other members of the team coming up and make other decisions.
Well, he does. The future Pike tells him he sent a letter to all the cadets and told all of them don't be there that day. Right. So it's like that one. Couldn't he have just stopped at those two, the two people who were going to die? Did he have to send it to all the cadets? Because he just sent it to the two that were going to die.
We know Pike. He's going to send it all.
So we see that Pike ends up going to the future, and he, in Star Trek fashion, he's pushed forward into a wedding that he's performing, and he doesn't know the name of the bride or the groom. He's like, we're here to join you and you. I was like, oh, dude, you're ruining the wedding. What are you doing? We find out that the future he's pushed into, it's past the day of the explosion. So he's already survived that. And he goes to meet Spock because he realizes number one is not there and has to tell Spock everything. And Spock's like, well, I should probably be captain because you're crazy, and has to do like a mind meld so Spock can understand what's really going on. It's interesting seeing Spock. Like, I want to know what their relationship is like, because we know that the reason that Spock is his number one is because Una is gone. It seems like Spock should trust Pike without hesitation, because it seems that's their relationship right now. And it seems like the Spock that we just met was very hesitant to believe Pike, and it's like, do you have a reason not to trust him? That part with that, his little hesitation and needing proof seemed a little out of character for me, just because, like, yes, it is a fanciful story, whatever, but this is also your captain who you should trust and who you've been through a lot with. Why wouldn't you like trust him? Why is your initial reaction to believe there's something wrong with him?
Right. This was where, for me, the storyline started to get a little murky, and I started to get disappointed in how the characters were changing. And we'll talk more about Ortega's later. But I felt like Spock's character changed, and maybe this is why I also needed a break in time between seeing Spock in this last big Gorn episode and all of these other episodes in which Spock was exploring more of his human side, and there was a lot of team building and trust, Spock amok. There was a lot of happier sides of Spock, and it seems like what's ever happened in the future in this timeline, he's very rigid. Something happened. I don't know what. I need some context there to better understand why it seems like a little bit more of a rift between him and Pike. And I could tell immediately when Pike joined the bridge in this future timeline, and then asked the status of the mission that they were on, and Spock told Pike to ask Ahura. He didn't state it. So that was a little weird. That was like, it was a little like past about that was a little weird, and I started to get some strange feelings that I was missing some piece of the story, and that's why I felt like I needed a little gap in time to help make that transition.
Yeah, because it definitely was a little. They were definitely way more standoffish than I would have expected of having 7 more years of friendship, you know?
Yeah.
But we find that they are at the same outpost that we saw in the very beginning of this episode, but now we're in the future. And Hansen, who's in charge of the outpost, he is trying to relate that he doesn't know what happened, that they came out of nowhere, that the attack wiped out everything, and even through the asteroid and like all the iron, all the protection, they stood no chance. And then we see this ship come out of a decloaking, destroys the asteroid. But I do like the fact that Captain Pike made a point to say, "Is your son there?" And then he's like, his son's not. And so Pike is sort of relieved that he still got to sort of save the kid. I like that. It's like the fact that the kid is still alive. So that was one of his that was one of the things that he needed to confirm for himself.
As soon as I heard that distress call and they showed the scene of the fire in the background and different things, I was like, beam them over. Like, save them. We don't have to talk about this one individual. Save everybody that's on that ship that's remaining. This is the outpost. Say you've met this gentleman. There's more to that crew. Save them. And they wanted to stay a distance. I was like, no.
Want to stay out of firing distance. And it's like, I understand that, but yes, you're right. Save the people.
Yeah, they have their torpedoes. They have all their. I feel like they're at a rescue mission at this point. So I don't understand why they did not help save this crew, but then later on in the story they did for another.
Interesting. So we see that they realize that the ship can't see them when they're not cloaked. So when they're cloaked. So they're basically trying to figure out how to get around and find the Romulans, because now the Romulans are they're an actual enemy to Starfleet, even though no one's really seen a Romulan in years or in 100 years, so no one really knows what they look like. When Spock was able to get a feed inside the Romulan ship and they put it up for everyone to see, and we see Ortega sort of like shoot her eyes back at Spock, everyone's very shocked because the Romulans look, I mean, we know, but they don't know that the Romulans look like Vulcans. And she's like, Spock has some explaining to do. And I literally, I was like, bitch, please. Who are you talking to like that? Spock, no one's seen a Romulan in 100 years. Why are you automatically assuming he has something to do with this? And then two, you're calling them pointy-eared bastards. First of all, Spock has pointy ears. If you don't get this, even though I knew this was the future and I knew this was sort of like a movie setting, like we're not seeing we're not going to see what's really happening. It's sort of filmed like a movie. I was like, Ortegas, you just been knocked off my favorite. Your future self had just sort of knocked you off one of my favorite people, because it's like you are blaming him for something he has no control over.
But I felt like that was out of character. I do not know where that came from. Like,
same.
With more research, I found out that basically they're taking one of the original series episodes and they reformulate it for this. So each one of these characters is playing a role that was in one of those original series, but that doesn't fit the Ortegas that we know. This Spock does not fit. So I would rather, if they made this alternative timeline, than try to pick up an original series episode and then make these characters fit into that, because it's not working. It does not work.
Because Ortegas is not that person to automatically assume Spock has some explaining to do. So back to when, like, right after Hansen was destroyed and Outpost 4 is destroyed and they're trying to figure out what's going on, they get held by the Farragut, which we find is La'an's new ship. And which means she's back in Starfleet at some point. We don't know when, but she's back at some point. And the captain is James T. Kirk. And Pike is like, Sam's brother? And people sort of look at him like, you should know this. Like, it's because for everyone else, it's common knowledge. For him, it's like, what is going on? And we see a young James T. Kirk sitting on the captain's chair, basically saying, look, I'm here to help. Let's figure this out. And the interesting is James and Pike have such very different strategies in going forward. James is very much shoot first, ask questions later. Pike is ask questions, threaten to shoot, ask more questions, and then shoot, which is not a problem because he does want to show peace and acceptance and give people chances. And James is of the nature of, no, they killed our people. They're over. They get no more chances. They shot first. We're retaliating. And Pike is the ever diplomat, which I love that about Pike. But some situations you need someone who's ready to dive into battle, make those hard decisions like that, versus trying to always find peace.
One of the reasons why Pike was able to find out so much information about Kirk was actually from Samuel, Kirk's brother. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised that he shared all the tea. I don't know. There might be a rift between the two of them.
Oh, yes.
Or they're very competitive, it sounds like, too.
No. They're not competitive. Sam's competitive with James. James is just living his life. Because the way Sam explained his brother, to me, it came off like... So here's the thing. It's like the rule. I can talk about my siblings. You can't talk about my siblings. I can rag on them all day long. You're not allowed to. And so when Pike calls James a wild card, Sam should not have said, oh, a whole deck of them. He should have said, no, he has some tendencies, but he's a good person. You always stick up for your siblings. Even if you don't talk to them for 10 years, I can talk about my brothers all day until I'm blue in the face. No one else is allowed to talk about my brothers until they're blue in the face. And it's like vice versa. And so it was like, Sam, I understand that maybe you might be a little jealous of your brother's position, but maybe have his back because he's coming onto your ship and you can already tell your captain is not 100% sure about him. Be like, oh, he's a good guy. Don't sit there and say, oh, I consider him a huge pain in the ass. Don't do that. Don't not in this situation, because this isn't like two friendly captains meeting at like some Starfleet outpost, or Starfleet like just on break or something. You're about to go into war, like you're about to go into a fight. You need to talk your brother up. Be like, yeah, my brother, oh, he's amazing. He got to that captain's share. You may think he's a wild card, but I think he's a fast thinker. You may think that he may be unpredictable, but sometimes you need that. Don't just like, oh, he's a wild card, a whole deck of them. Stand up for your brother.
Like I said a few episodes ago, and I'm sticking to this, Samuel Kirk is a jerk.
Yes.
And if you have your brothers back, I don't know. I'm a little worried about how you have anyone else on this cruise back.
You should have died, and the other lieutenant from last episode should have survived, because you're trash, boy. You're trash. So, on this whole second half of this episode, it's all about the interactions with the Romulans, and how both Captain Kirk and Captain Pike have very different tactics in handling them. And so we see when James comes over to the Enterprise, his brother is a little punk and gives him a hug, like he just wasn't talking bad about him to his own captain. And we see that they start to decide they need to figure out how to take out the bird of prey. And the issue is that while they're cloaked, they can't find them. So they come up with a plan. Well, if they're heading back to neutral space, they have to go through the comet's tail. And if they can position themselves on either side of the comet's tail, they'll be able to see the bird of prey when it goes through to sort of get rid of the ship. And so that's the plan. And for the most part, it's sort of working until the Farragut gets sort of, to the bird of prey arrives right behind the Farragut and fires. I'm going to admit, Captain Pike did hesitate on returning fire. He did. Yeah. He hesitated. And the thing is, it's like, Pike, why are you hesitating? Because it's not even like this is a ship coming out of nowhere. It's a ship that's already destroyed the outpost, just fired on the USS Farragut. The ship is being aggressive. Like, why are you trying to broker peace after the death of people? Like, wipe them out or let them know you're not here to be played around with. And so when Pike fires on the ship, on the bird of prey, they end up having to save everyone from the Farragut because their life support is about to go. Pike goes down to the transport, and we see La'an come onto the ship. And she has her hair down. She's all light and free. And she runs and gives this man a hug. La'an, the one that we know, gives this man a hug and is very excited. And he asks her about number one. And she's like, I can't talk. What do you mean? No, I haven't spoken to her. No one can talk to her.
Mm-hmm. And she could tell that something's wrong. But it also goes to show that Pike is missing some vital information from his timeline to this. More than 7 years, but things have changed and he's not on top of it, not just like ranks, but what's going on in a federation right now. And that worries me with decisions.
We also find out that the bird of prey their ship is injured, as well as the Enterprise. And so Pike is able to broker some type of like, I don't know where this came from, because if I was a bird of prey, I just wouldn't have like agreed to any type of peace. But it's giving time to repair their ships. Did you understand that scene?
It's a stalling tactic, basically.
It is a stalling tactic. It definitely is. I don't get why you wouldn't just warp away.
I was wondering about that too.
Because like you have everyone from the Farragut unless you couldn't leave the ship behind, but you have everyone on the Farragut on the Enterprise warp away. After that whole conversation, Ortega's like, the Romulans can't be trusted. And this is, even though I don't like her, the ways that she talked to Spock, she's right. They can't be trusted. They can't be. They just destroyed an outpost, and they've already destroyed 1, 2, and 3. This is not the first time this has happened. Like, this isn't an accidental misunderstanding of, oh, we thought you were someone else. They are deliberately destroying Starfleet tech and just killing Starfleet people. Stop them. Well, we see that the commander, while he is doing his job, doesn't really want to do his job. And we see like he's not idealized to the Romulan way. We can tell that he knows there's a better way of doing this. that he doesn't want another war. And we can see there's still the younger people, his sub commander, who is still idealized, and they're not hardened, they're not jaded, they're not over the fact that I don't want to die in a war anymore. Like, it's not glorious to die for endless war. No one ever wins an endless war.
Right, but if the Romulan commander is tired of war, tired of fighting, wants to consider other approaches, then why attack the star base in neutral territory? Like, they
I don't think
started.
it's a choice. I don't think it's a choice. It's like, you do your orders. He was ordered to do that, because we see when the rest of the Romulans come that it was like his job to do so.
Oh, I thought that then the head lady in charge, she was disappointed that
he got caught.
Oh,
that's why he got destroyed, because he got caught. Because she was like, there's no proof of that. And Pike was like, there's definite proof. Show them the proof of the bird of prey. Because they say, I don't know what you're talking about. You fired on our ship, quote unquote. She was being like a Karen, like, we didn't do anything wrong. We're here to protect our one ship because you attacked our ship. And he's like, no, he destroyed an outpost. It's like, there's no proof of that. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Because she already asked, like, don't you want to go ahead and surrender? Surrender for what? Like, lady, what are you talking about? And Pike shows her the video that they have of the bird of prey destroying the outpost. And she's like, oh, well, he should have never been caught. We're going to call him. And so, like, he got killed because he got caught, not because of what he did.
Oh, thank you for explaining that, because I was trusted. I didn't think she was lying.
No, she was lying.
Okay, so and this is the big difference from the Romulans, from the Vulcans. Vulcans don't lie about these things, and it goes to show, Ortegas, that even though they may look similar, their cultures are very different.
Mm-hmm. Definitely not trustworthy group of people. We know that Spock and everyone is basically using those 2 hours to save the ship. Captain Kirk goes to find an armada for them because he believes, because Captain Kirk is worst case scenario, Captain Pike is best case scenario. And so Captain Kirk is like, well, they may call for help, and Pike is like, well, we can't call for help. We're weeks away. He's like, but they don't know that. And so he goes, and Kirk was right, because we see the Romulan Armada come, and then he comes with a fake armada of mining drills and ships and transport ships that can't fight, but it shows numbers. He's able to save the Enterprise from basically getting shot because they attacked one of the mining ships that was trying to protect the Enterprise, and Kirk beams back on board, and they have to warp away, but they're fired upon. Pike hears what happened, where the damage was, and realizes he knows who's there, and he runs down to the med bay, and we see the bride from who was getting married that same day dead. Her fiance or husband, because I don't even know if they ever actually got married, is like, WTF, because like this was supposed to be the happiest day of his life, and he just lost her. And then we saw the part that made me pause and walk away for a moment, because we see where Spock is, and the first thing that we see is a blue shirt and one leg and one half of a leg. And I forgot that Vulcans have green blood, because I was like, what's all that green crap on him? I was like, oh crap, that's his blood. I forgot for a second they have green blood when I was first watching it. We see his face is disfigured. We see that he is in terrible shape. And Nurse Chapel looks like she's ready to cry. And she's naming all the injuries that Spock went through. And she's like, if he survives this, he'll never be the same. And Pike realizes Spock got the future that was determined for him. And so when he goes back to his quarters, he meets his future self again. And his future self says, no matter what you do, Spock's the one who's going to pay the price. And the issue is, Spock is the only one who can really broker peace between the Romulans and Starfleet. And we know that's true because we see it in the future of Discovery. I like that Captain Pike realizes that it's a fate you don't want, but it's a fate you have to truly accept, and you can't change it anymore. You can't try and change it anymore, which I don't agree with, but because I don't want my Pike to die, because I love him, but I understand it's for the greater good. So what do you
Pike
think of those
Spock.
scenes?
Pike Spock.
I know, I love Spock more. I'm sorry, Pike. I'm so sorry. But what did you think of like those ending scenes of the fight of the Romulans, of Spock, like just dying?
Yeah, that was so touching. I needed a moment to take all of that in, because there was actually a lot in that short bit of time in that sick bay to see the bride and groom again and make that connection, and then slowly the unveiling of Spock, because I don't think they said Spock's name at first. So as you said, you had them start to make the connection and put the pieces of the puzzle together. So that was touching. The only thing I kept thinking was that, like, isn't there another way? Isn't there another way? And of course, it's if Pike just lets fate take its course, so that Spock can become the ambassador and then make peace for centuries to come. Spock has a much bigger journey and leadership ahead of him, and he's also a big character in the franchise. And let's face it, like, there's a lot of fandom for Spock. Spock is the man. And he cannot die at the end of season 1 of Strange New Worlds. Or even 7 years from that point. I do want to circle back for a bit, because when Kirk left on that shuttle, I was thinking, well, why don't they like scatter? Why doesn't Leon take a shuttle and go with, I don't know, a group of 10? Like, at least take some people off the front line of this war. Save something. You don't have to, like, the 2 ships, 2 crews merge into one. So maybe they could split up and then get reinforcements, or like just
have some people survive.
Survivors. Yeah. If something were to happen. And I thought that was a missed opportunity there. I'm glad it worked out. And I wasn't at all fearful that Kirk was going to die because of the story. And I know this franchise is never going to kill Kirk in Strange New Worlds.
I mean, he could have died in the future and he needed to be there. It could be one other thing that Pike realized he couldn't do. I mean, because he wouldn't have died in real life if he just died in this future movie. It would have been like, this is what would have happened, and we need him to be alive. Type thing. Same with Spock. That's what I'm saying. Like, if he did die, it would have been like, you can't lose him, because if he had the Enterprise, this whole thing would have been different.
And Kirk also seemed a little too eager when he thought that Pike was possibly going to retire. He's like, "Oh, you're going to retire? Like, I can." I was like, "Slow your roll. I'm here for Pike, not you."
So because we see after Pike's future self leaves, and like Pike knows that he can go back to the past, basically to the real timeline. We see that Kirk does come in, and they have like their heart to heart, and like a little quick one, and that's when like I feel like Pike sort of understands there was a different way of handling it. I think for him, it made him realize that if this had, because Kirk stated like if they had just destroyed the bird of prey right out, none of this may have happened. A war might not have been started. And I think Pike realizes that's what his future self really wanted him to learn, is that you can't always do diplomacy, and then sometimes you need hard action, because if they had just destroyed the bird of prey outright, that war would have been avoided. The war that would have cost millions of lives. Like, yeah, you saved yours and you survived. Not everyone else did. You cost so many more people their lives. And so we see that Pike goes back to the past, and he talks to Spock, and we get to see our Spock again come in, and Pike's like, "I'm very happy to see you." And Spock's like, "Dude, you just saw me. Chill. Like, you're a little too close to me. What's going on?" And Pike sort of a roundabout way says that he understands the future in a way of, my sacrifice will save others. And then Spock sort of realizes sort of what he said. He's like, basically, if my future doesn't happen to me, you die, basically. And Spock's like, "I'm very thankful to you, Captain." And he calls him Chris. And it's like, oh, look at you guys. Hearts. And then we think the episode's going to end on a high note, because Pike goes back to the bridge and he's seeing all of his crew. And we see the real Ortegas, not the racist one. We see everyone sitting there. And then his little friends with benefits girl, who I was starting to like, come in, and it also shows like you have a job to do, and it sucks. And it asks for Una and Captain Pike, and they found out that Una is not a human and is Illyrian, and they arrest her. And Pike is ready to go to town. Pike is ready to fight for Una. Una has to tell him, "No, I always said this day would come." I can tell his friends with benefits situation is over because he's choosing Una over that girl. And she's like, "This isn't over." He's like, she's like, "I'm really sorry." He's like, "So am I, because this isn't over." And I think the girl realized he doesn't care about you as much as you think he is, because the moment you come for his team, he's done with you. He doesn't care that this is your orders. You shouldn't, like, there's certain things you shouldn't do. And yeah, Pike is ready to fight Starfleet for Una. So it makes me think, what did he do for Una in the future past? Because like we know that in the future she's on a penal colony. So it made me think, like, did he try to fight for her? Did he not? I wouldn't could he have looked at the logs of like what went wrong? How do I fix this? Okay, I did all of this. Let me try something different to save her.
Right. And let's remind everyone why she basically is arrested for deception, because she's been genetically mutated and she did not share that information with Starfleet. And that is frowned upon, unethical, not supported by the Federation. And so, yeah, she's like separated now from everyone. I don't know. It sounds like there might be a mission to help, or maybe a case, maybe a trial, but he has to be careful too, so that he doesn't share the fact that he knew but did not share this information with the Federation. So he has to walk a very careful line.
I love how Friends with Benefit girl, because I'm refusing to give her name, when she said she's Illyrian, he's like, and I don't care. I think that was a shock for her, because I feel like sometimes when you're in those organizations and you sometimes think everyone thinks like you and everyone's a stickler for the rules, and then you do have some people are like, it doesn't matter. That rule is stupid. Like, that rule doesn't help anyone. Why are we following it? So what? She's Illyrian. Did she try and get anyone else to do modifications on herself? No. Has her record been exemplary? Yes. Look, I don't care. Like, Pike, one thing I love about Pike is that he judges you on your character, and not on your people. Because we even see when he found out that the Romulan commander was about to be destroyed, he offered to save them. And that is not something James T. Kirk would have done. Yeah. And Pike is an ever optimist, and he always wants to see the best in people, which is both a good and bad thing, because sometimes fighting for peace when people don't want peace, you're just fighting a losing battle. And sometimes you have to like understand, sometimes it's action. I'm really upset that it ended on a low note, as to say. Like, I would have preferred a mystery. I would have preferred or just the whole part with Una not happening. This episode was already an emotional roller coaster of ups and downs and learning and understanding and growth, that he finally gets back and he's like, oh, okay. Like, you see almost like another weight is lifted off of him, and he's ready to go about his business. He's like looking up James T. Kirk and how he's on the Farragut right now. And he's like, okay, this is going to be the man who's going to take over the Enterprise. He's going to be Spock's best friend, even though he don't know that part yet. Like, it's a lot. And then now you're throwing in the fact that his best friend, Una, is gone. I mean, she was always a little too perfect anyway, but still, don't matter.
Right. So this is also the reason why I felt like it was more of a season premiere than a finale, because of that last, I don't know, 10 minutes or so. Mm-hmm. I do agree with you. If they would have just ended with the scene, with the discussion on the couch between James T. Kirk and Captain Pike, I would have felt more closure. Mm-hmm. But they opened up a whole other Pandora's box with the situation with number one. And I also am a big fan of a strong female lead, to know that possibly in this upcoming season, we're not going to have number one.
Yeah.
We're not going to have Leanne.
Possibly, yes.
And we lost our chief engineer. So we're going to get 3 new members of...
Speaking of engineer, I meant to mention this earlier. We don't see, but we hear a Scottish brogue, as I can't do a Scottish voice. I'm so sorry, people. When Spock was trying to fix the tubes in the future. So we got a little hint, nudge, nudge of someone in the future with a little Scottish voice. Granted, I doubt we're gonna see them next season because this was 7 years in the future. But it was a nice little nod to a nice engineer that we love that has a Scottish accent.
Yeah, well, and Scotty has to join at some point in time to get to the
I'm giving her all she's got, Captain.
Lining up the fact that we're going to have some new characters next season.
Yes, we will. Okay, do you have any final thoughts before we end this episode?
Like you, I like the fact that Strange New Worlds typically has happy, upbeat endings. I'm a little disappointed that this season finale did not. In the big picture of things, I could take some small happy endings out of this episode of a few chapters here and there. The fact that we were able to explore a new civilization but not go to the civilization but learn more about the Romulans from afar was interesting to me. I totally agree with the Starbase commander that he stated up front that he needed resources. Boy, was he right. And I hope that other outposts, especially those that are in hotspots like that, have reinforcements available to them. Shame on the Federation for putting them out there and not having enough resources to support their needs. And I'm looking forward to more stories, but I also want the crew to be supported because I don't like it when some of these characters I become connected to pass away.
Final thoughts for me on this season is I loved it. I really enjoyed it. It was a great refresh for me mentally. It was relaxing after, because Discovery did get a little heavy after watching it like back to back to back to back. So this was a great refresh. I loved it, and I am very excited to see what comes at season 2. I wonder if we're going to meet a different version of James, because we know that he's in Starfleet right now. We know that he's on the Farragut, so I wonder if there's going to be any crossovers, because we know that's where La'an ends up anyway. So it could be to have it's just very sort of, there's so many options that could possibly happen. So I am very excited to see what may come. Okay, well, that is the end of this episode of season 1. Make sure you come back next week to hear the season recap, where we have a special guest joining. We'll announce that the day of. But as always, I'm Andrea.
I'm Monica.
And live long and prosper.